Thank you guys for watching those excerpts from the Leonardo da Vinci documentary that will be airing on KEET in November. It's Ken Burns, so of course we know it's going to be excellent, and it was, the segments that we saw. I was asked to moderate this discussion. I am by no means a Leonardo da Vinci expert, but I do find his life fascinating, and the films certainly didn't disappoint. A panel has been arranged of folks who are creative and artistic and all of the things sort of that kind of represent locally what Leonardo was all about. And I'm going to mention them by name, and then they'll each give a minute-long introduction to themselves so that I don't butcher it. Like I said, I'm James Faulk. I host Headline Humboldt on KEET. I have a podcast, Neon Galactic, and I've been a journalist in Humboldt County for a while. Next to me is Lindsay. Lindsay, you want to talk a little bit about who you are and why you were invited to be here today?
My name is Lindsay Kessner, and I am an artist and writer based here in Eureka. I teach in the art departments at both College of the Redwoods and Cal Poly Humboldt. And my own work is mostly painting, some video that integrates ideas of memory and place with drawing from science and mythology.
Excellent. And then Lonny, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Lonny Grafman. I teach at Cal Poly Humboldt, and I'm an author, an inventor, and a teacher. Most importantly, though, I'm a team member, and I get to work with people all around the world, building stuff like schoolrooms made out of waste plastic bottles that catch their own rainwater and catch their own solar power and grow their own food.
And then Carol.
I'm Carol Keig. I'm a math lecturer at Sonoma State University in Rohnert Park. I'm also a member of the Kinetic Universe. If you watch the Kinetic Race, you may have seen me racing. I'm also occasionally a writer, and I would call myself more of a crafter than an artist, although I am a performing artist. I sing and play a variety of instruments, and I'm happy to be here.
Well, thank you guys for being on the panel, and I guess I want to start with the contrast that I noticed between the world that Leonardo occupied and the world that we live in. In a lot of ways, it was a much more open world in terms of his engagement with the universe, and the mind was sort of an undiscovered country. And I think that part of his brilliance was figuring out how to deploy his own creativity and his own observation skills and put that to work. But, in this day and age, I'd like to ask each of the panelists to answer this question. What do you think is relevant about Leonardo da Vinci, and what can, people today, and in particular your students, take from his work that may not be obvious on the surface?
One of the things that I think is the most relevant is this idea that he was attempting to communicate through his paintings the interior workings, the movements of the mind of the individuals that he was painting. Mm-hmm. And he was doing it through representation of specific figures, but I think this is the activity that contemporary art is engaged with. The focus has shifted in many cases to the inner workings of the mind of the artist, but the purpose of the work is really to represent the interior workings of the mind through the canvas. We have in contemporary art just moved away a little bit from representation. He does it through observation, through representation of the natural world, and the act of observation, though, is central to any artistic practice, and that's for my students, especially in my drawing classes. That's what I talk about endlessly, that observation is the activity of drawing, and Da Vinci's work, that's what it is all about.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll kind of carry on with that observation part, and one of the things you see in the documentary a lot is how much Da Vinci saw observation of one thing being so similar to another thing. Mm-hmm. And I think that eye, and if you don't mind, I'll talk to the younger people in the crowd, but you ever see like a cloud and you're like, oh, it's a rabbit? Yes. Yeah, that type of eye that all our observations are somehow connected is something that I think that the kids are naturally great at, and a lot of the adults, and maybe him not being a lettered man helped him not be beat out of that and be able to see and be able to observe the world as being connected.
And I would also like to follow the idea of your inner kindergartner that I have never heard a kindergartner say, well, I'm not creative. That all children dance and sing and paint and create stories and build things. And at some point, we unintentionally beat that out of them. And I think that we can choose not to. I think we can continue to value our inner kindergartners and continue to value our inner Da Vinci. We have in our culture a reverence for, sorry about the gendering, the Renaissance man. Okay, Da Vinci was a Renaissance man, by which we mean, wow, really good at a whole lot of very different things. Anyone can learn more about anything by looking at it from another discipline and bringing multiple disciplines together and getting more than the sum of its parts. But in our culture, even though we have this wistfulness for the Renaissance man, we have an actual practice of over-specialization, that you become very good at one thing, while we still dream about being very good at many things. And I think we still have the choice to all be a little bit of Leonardo.
Yeah, and then one more,
Sure,
thing
yeah.
on that is that I don't know what it was like at that time, and how closed they thought the world and how open they thought the world was. But I do believe that we're still just babies in this universe and do
Absolutely.
not understand how our own minds work.
Yeah, and I think that humility is a fundamental realization that we need to find as a culture, because we think all the answers have been found, and so that limits the questions we're asking,
100%.
Yeah. And that leads me to my next question, which is about wonder. Watching the documentary, you can see, or at least you can sort of perceive, the manner in which Leonardo was encountering the world, and he was eyes wide open, and he was absorbing and trying to learn through observation and experience as the disciple of experience. And he was willing to engage open-ended questions and then trust his own answers to what he saw and what he found. How can we today, and especially, you were talking to the younger people, and I have kids, and so that's always my focus. How do we encourage young people today to kind of shed the manacles of all the answered questions, the Wikipedias of the world, all the instantly accessible reservoirs of knowledge, and let them engage with the world on their own terms and come to their own answers and observations? If you guys can all take a crack at that if you want.
I think it's allowing some space for play.
Yeah.
Like giving some free time, not having every second prescribed and structured, offering opportunities for discovery that aren't knowledge being just imparted, but where students have that, and children in general, have that experience of learning something for themselves. And I think that the only way to really have that experience is with some open-endedness in terms of time, with access to materials to the world, so that they can literally just play.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll go with play is, but and I love taking that and turning it into things that also serve a practical purpose is one of my jobs.
Yeah.
And what you find is that most of the answers that are still out there to be found are not just one answer, right? And that exploration, that ability to find that there isn't just one answer, and it isn't just in the back of the book, and you shouldn't look at the back of the book, right? And I think I stole that line from Sir Ken Robinson, but the idea that when we ask open-ended play questions, and also can give it a practical purpose, like what is the best way for your household to be getting your food, is a question that will always be evolving, and kids can have some amazing answers. And I bet Da Vinci, I don't know what he did with, well, like for instance, his water transportation plans that you now see being re-implemented again in communities that have realized that distributed resources are often more resilient than centralized resources, is another example where technology from 500 years ago all of a sudden is having a renaissance of sorts.
I see what you did there.
Thanks.
I want to go with play also. I also want to go with adults continuing to play.
Yeah, absolutely.
That modeling playful behavior, giving in to playful behavior, being the kind of grown-up that values your own childishness and makes kids not think, boy, I sure hope I die before I get old. Be the grown-up that plays. And there's another aspect of this that's very important to me, and that's fear of failure. One of the things I love about Da Vinci is not the things he made that work, but the things he made that couldn't possibly work, and he made them anyway. Yeah. When I hear someone say, I'm not creative, I think what I hear them saying is, I'm afraid that what I do isn't good enough. Mm-hmm. So you would never tell a child, that picture sucks. People do not have 6 fingers. Well, keep drawing pictures yourself of people with 6 fingers. Yeah. Give yourself permission to fail. Another way that I've heard this put is the first step at not sucking at something is pushing through sucking at it. Yeah. Go ahead and be miserable at something. Put in the hours and have a good time failing. Magic school bus. Take chances, make mistakes, and get messy.
I'd like that notion of play, I mean, that runs through the spirit of all of his work, and it's like he approached even his most serious work, I think, with an attitude of play, and I think that joy in the creative process, not that he told me that or anything, but that's what I'm seeing, and I think that allowing yourself that freedom of experimentation and not, holding yourself too accountable for things that don't turn out precisely the way that you anticipated, I think, is key. And I wonder, to turn this toward, where we're at right now, in the age of social media, a lot of times you can get publicity, or you can publicly display your work perhaps before it's ready, and so that play takes on a performative role, and it can get judged, and that can shut people down. How do we maintain openness when the urge so often is to do something and then put it out in public, and do something and put it out in public? Is there a way to incubate talents in a world where that demand is constantly seeking to be met?
I'm a big fan of community projects, small community projects. Right now at Cal Poly Humboldt, we just built a pretty epic maker space for people to come just play and make things. And it real quick, you see that it's not performative. Yeah. Not to say that performative, no judgment on performative, but you'll see that people in the space, they're making stuff to make stuff because they want to make stuff, and they're showing to each other to get ideas on how to make new things. Yeah. And especially, in a country where I think we're remembering that making things is important, it puts some external value on something that I think is actually intrinsically valuable, which is that as humans, we're meant to create things. Mm-hmm. We're born creative. And what I find is that once people start doing it, they don't care as much about what it's going to look like. But that seal, right before you do it, that moment where it's like, ooh, if I do that and it turns out poorly, I wouldn't want that, so I'm not going to do it. So I think that the more we can do, and I think that libraries are starting to do that. I'm glad that Cal Poly Humboldt is building even more spaces for that, and other schools. But I think that the more we can do to re-break that seal for adults, to say, hey, just get in there. And what do you call it? Get messy? Messy. Yeah. that once you break that seal, as soon as people start doing it, I think that if I understand your question, I think that part drops.
Yeah. Absolutely.
There's something I want to add to what you were saying about social media. Aside from the question of creativity and the maker spirit, we're mean to each other for no reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't even need
disagree. No, I'm sorry.
How dare you say that?
Now, even politeness can be weaponized, as we know. I mean, anything can be weaponized. The Stay Puft Marshmallow Man was rather famously weaponized. I want us to give permission to ourselves to be brave, but I also really would like people just to be nicer to each other. including on
Absolutely.
social media.
Yeah.
I think this is a really good question, and in addition to what has already been said, like focusing on an idea and modeling a kind of growth mindset that no matter where I am at in my practice of whatever I am doing, that there is always room to grow.
Yeah.
So that if thinking about what is my purpose in putting something out as a performance, and then hearing feedback or critique no longer has to be like this injury to my soul, but can instead be a path forward for me to evolve my practice into something even better. And I agree that has to happen on both sides, from when we're giving feedback as well as when we're receiving it.
Yeah. It's interesting too, like he was a big fan of keeping notebooks, and some of his notebooks have some of the most ingenious stuff that he's done, and it's fascinating to me because that's not necessarily for public review.
Right.
And I think that a lot of times kids now and the social media generation and instant feedback or whatever, it's like they think it's about creating for someone else to see, and maybe they're, we need to be clearer about, well, the process of creating art or doing work or inventing something is internal also, and that there's great reward to be found in that process and in that development. And that's the experience that people like Leonardo, probably focused on, since he wasn't having the instant kind of gratification of other people's opinions.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much at parties Leonardo was like, pull out a mirror. I'm gonna show you what I made. But hey, whatever gets people to play, I'm into. Like if it's so that they can show that final project. And there's things that I make that I'm just excited. I have some projects that are only for public view. I mean, we made a floating food forest through New York. We had 275,000 visitors in person. We made it for people to see.
Yeah.
But also, along the way, the real fun was working with the incredible group of people, including the visionary of that project, Mary Mattingly, to make it happen. Yeah. But also, we really wanted people to see it.
Yeah. Not that there's anything wrong with it,
Well, and some things still take work. Yeah. The very first thing you do, the very first thing you try, it might be iterative. Mm-hmm. You still need the chops. You still need to work on your skills, and that can be frustrating in any subject. It can be frustrating in art, music, sports, math, engineering. The hours you have to log to get the chops, to get the skills. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean you shouldn't leave time for fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Another interesting question that I always want to ask educators, especially people who are in the fields that you guys are in. I mean, it's largely acknowledged that Leonardo da Vinci was a once-in-a-generation, once-in-a-millennium genius. In your guys' fields, you are educating people who are coming up in these fields, and I wonder how you treat genius if you encounter it. Like, there's always the age-old question, like if you have a group of kids and there's one kid who really stands out and has, a lot of potential, should we focus more on that kid to try and realize that, innate genius, and how do you balance that against keeping the rest of the kids engaged and busy as well without pulling away from what they get? I mean, what are your guys' attitudes and approach toward especially successful or genius kids? And how do you encourage them without discouraging others?
Smaller class size.
Amen, right?
Earlier I said I thought that it's still a world of wonder, and, like it was then, but I really think that all the problems left to tackle can't be tackled by any individual genius. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's about how do we pull out the genius of groups of people, which is much easier in smaller class sizes. Like individual superstar genius, it doesn't, I think it's cool, the same way I think it's like any specific talent is, but really the problems we have left to tackle are about how do we get people to work together.
Yeah.
And so I kind of force them into groups.
Yeah, the priority is the group rather than the individual.
Yeah, and I as an educator, I try to give problems that are so big that even an individual genius can't do it all alone. It's in one of my classes, it's a 60-page document. It's a physical artifact. They have to go out and interview people. There's like so many aspects. You couldn't do it alone. And so, yeah, it's great when somebody has a team member whose mind thinks in mathematical images or can draw like Leonardo. I mean, every single drawing I have still has to have labels. If I draw an apple, it has a label that says apple. But it doesn't mean I can't, because no one will know otherwise. But it doesn't mean that I don't belong on the team. Just maybe my art isn't the one that's going to be shown.
Well, and I think the question is applicable beyond just the idea of the genius, right? All students have different things that they're particularly gifted at and different needs. And I do think that sometimes I do encounter students that have a particular natural insight or ability into something or another. It could be intellectual, it could be a totally different aspect. But students do have different needs, and smaller groups is absolutely critical. But I think about balancing how to treat everyone with equity, but make things requirements and projects and flexible enough in order to give opportunities for growth to students who do have different needs.
Yeah. I keep harping on this difference between now and then, and like how we can sort of foster this level of achievement in a generation that's not necessarily intimate with nature as a source of inspiration, or and like we were talking about earlier, Carol, the idea of AI. Like now, it's easy for kids or anybody else to go online and say, "Well, I need an illustration for this article I'm writing, so I'm just going to type in this thing," and all of a sudden, this really cool drawing pops up. But there's no one to credit. There's no real creativity that goes into it because it's recycled images from the internet or whatever. So, I mean, what do we do with that? I mean, do we with that easy access of AI, for example, what is that? How do we protect ourselves as a culture from relying too heavily on that kind of easy answer and valuing that instant gratification over the hard work and original vision that comes with a human artist?
I would say if there's really any competition, then we don't need to value the human artist, right? If it actually becomes that AI can make something that really is as inspiring, as moving, then we shouldn't be giving preference to the human creativity. But I personally don't see a risk for that, and I think the way that we work with that is by spending time looking at different kinds of art, engineering, whatever it is, and being exposed to and nature, being exposed and building a sensitivity to appreciate the differences between Leonardo da Vinci's paintings and whatever knockoff that there is. Because whether it's AI producing it or someone just copying a painting, right? If you're really looking, you can feel the difference in those things,
Absolutely.
right? And we can cultivate that sensitivity. And I think that's how we protect ourselves. And honestly, if it becomes equivalent, then I think we have a much more, quite frankly, interesting philosophical question. But I don't think we're at risk for that anytime soon, personally.
Okay.
I love this question. I think I really look forward to looking back at this recording like 20 years from now and seeing what we thought. I have two different directions that are really important to me in the thinking about this question, and one of them is that there was probably a time that if you didn't make your own paint, you weren't a real artist. If you didn't make your own canvas, you weren't a real artist. And but it just helped us get more and more artists and more. Like further with it. And sometimes it feels like we birth new technologies just so we can have new art. We're like, oh, we kind of got bored of that type of music, let's add electronic. But the old stuff doesn't go away. Like, just because we have photography doesn't mean we lost our portrait painters. But then there's this other thing that I'm excited about. I don't know if it'll happen, but I feel like local artists it's a way to kind of come back, because local art will always have more of an impact to me because I know not just the subject but the artists themselves. I'm kind of excited to see if by us having AI that can generate, if it can get to that spot, then having a local artist or a local musician that you can connect to, that becomes important as well. But you look at when you're a mathematician, when the calculator came about, it didn't make like eventually people embraced the calculator and realized that the actual mechanical aspect of it, of doing calculations, was the smallest part of math thinking and art thinking.
Yeah, and this has been a tension for the entire Industrial Revolution.
Yeah,
That when suddenly you could spin fibers and get threads. It put when that could be done with the machine, it put the people who could make string by hand with the distaff, it put them out of work. And then when you had a loom that could weave it into cloth that was powered, it put the weavers out of work. And it's been a tension throughout the Industrial Revolution, but it's also been, so long as there is a way to share the wealth, it's made everybody's life wealthier. Now, when the technology, this is an entirely different discussion, when technology is held in the hands of a few, it makes those few richer and everybody else poorer, but that's a different discussion. A calculator, it's a fast pencil. So it lets you get the calculations out of the way so that you can start doing the thinking and the discovery and the application, and the beauty can start to be revealed, or the thing that you are trying to solve can start to be solved, because we have this fast tool that is a powerful tool that is helping you. AI seems to be potentially a powerful tool. I share your disbelief that they're going to become sentient and enslave us all. I mean, that makes a great sci-fi plot, but I don't see it from where I'm sitting today. But as far as letting it do my housework for me so that I can get back to writing and creating, you go, AI, you go. Yeah.
Well, that was an interesting point that you made before, though, is like you want it to be doing the housework so that you can do the stuff that's creative. I guess my concern is that with the writing applications and the generative art, that it's going to make it so convenient to come up with easy solutions that less people will want to develop the skills to do their own versions that at first at least are going to be less than standard, because the AI is going to be better.
But then the one person who does, it's going to operate on such a different level,
Yeah.
you know? So it could encourage some people to explore that. I mean, at the end of the day, the art, like the math or whatever, is about ideas.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the part that at least right now, and maybe AI will get there and that will be an interesting moment, but at least right now, it's a tool, but the ideas are coming from the person who is using that tool. I mean, I had some students, they have to write an artist statement, and they popped it in there during class and read me back the artist statement that the AI wrote. And it sounded like an artist statement. It did not say anything. It had no content. And it was like, my art explores ideas. That's about what it said. You know, there was no content to it.
Yeah.
So, but yes, one day AI may be able to generate the ideas, and then we'll be having a very different conversation.
And I'm glad we're not going to get into the ethic discussion, because I think that is another very important issue about just distribution of resources, but also of citing sources. But I mean, I used AI on the way over here to ask how my work was similar to Da Vinci's work.
Yeah.
And I was surprised by the answers, and some of them ended up being really helpful for today. Yeah. Like I hadn't thought about how many of his ideas, even though he was writing backwards, which was the vision that I had of him, of him hiding his ideas. Yeah, he was a genius on his own. I work with, I believe that the community is the genius, but I'm the president of this site called Apperpedia. It's got 64,000 pages of solutions, and apparently, according to AI, a similarity is that he kept those recorded because he knew that eventually these inventions would be important, right? And so I used AI for that. I mean, I wouldn't have like read it, but I was like, oh, that was some interesting stuff. And I think that we probably already do have prompt artists and prompt engineers and prompt mathematicians who are learning how to work with the AI. And I do think that we'll see a whole new world, but it'll also it'll birth some new artists. But I can't imagine ever losing, we haven't yet, are artists that are following classical forms.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting too, what you're saying about like we'll have artists who are, prompt artists or whatever. It's like no matter what new evolution of technology or thinking that comes along, eventually it flowers into some sort of creative practice that fosters a whole different level of creativity. People like used to bemoan video games, it's a mind suck and kids are losing, they're going outside, but now there are basically, budding Da Vinci's of video game design who are doing absolutely fantastic work, and it's just as creative and visionary as anything we've done before, but it's in a whole different medium and a whole different kind of creative universe. And that's important for old folks like me to realize,
Absolutely.
Well, the example that you made with the camera and portrait artists. So it could also be argued that once the camera came into existence, artists were freed from the necessity to document things, and the whole field of abstract and then non-objective art came from that, and that's an amazing innovation.
Yeah, I mean, I really wouldn't be surprised if eventually we figure out that every technology was because we got bored with our entertainment. And but just because I like electronic music, it doesn't change the fact that when a friend is playing a guitar and singing live, it has an impact on me that almost nothing else can have.
Yeah. Lonny, I wanted to ask you, because I haven't really, the engineering part of this I've sort of neglected. It's interesting, you mentioned that you've traveled all over the world and that you've helped the communities build projects and help design.
Or I get to work in communities that are helping themselves.
Okay, yeah. But I appreciate that, and there's a certain permission that you're giving yourself and the community is giving for you to have these ideas that are outside the box, using older either trash materials or whatever else to create innovation. And, how do we bring more of that here, where everything is prefab and we have solutions that we can go to big, Home Depot and buy, whereas more creative, even artistic expressions of the human mind are building things out of parts that were taken out of other things and creating this sort of, artistic assemblage. How can we do that in this culture, do you think?
Well, it's funny. I've been asked that question a lot over the past 20-something years, and I don't think that anyone believed the answers until COVID. So you'd see that on Appropedia, the website I was talking about, we'd have these solutions that be viewed, tens of thousands of times by countries all over the world, but not many in the U.S. And then COVID happened, and that first or second month, we realized that efficient supply chains aren't resilient. Yeah. And so I don't mean this as a fear-based thing, but often if we focus on resilience, it's more joyful in the moment, but then protects us in the future. And so when communities can create spaces where people can create businesses making the things that their community needs out of the stuff that they have around, then I think that those communities thrive, and I also think that it builds in resilience. And we have local groups doing that right now, just all around, even just on building. There's the Indigenous Habitat Institute working on hempcrete, and there's Isaac Lyons making tiny homes, and there's maker spaces popping up around town. And I think that as communities, we can just put some resources into places where people can make the things that we need.
Yeah. That's pretty much all I had in terms of questions. Is there anything you guys want to talk about that I didn't ask about, or any questions from the audience?
Can we read your shirt?
Oh. Good mathematics is not about knowing all the answers. It's how you behave when you don't know.
And that ties back to that play. If you can teach yourself and your kids to celebrate failure, to literally be excited, because it means that you don't know everything and there's still surprise in the world. And if you start seeing failure like that, play becomes a lot easier. Yeah,
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all. I appreciate you.
Wonderful. Thank you for the questions.